Okay, let's see. We're on Zoom. I have to click play. Live on Facebook. On Zoom. Okay, I can hear myself. I have to click play. All right. Live on Facebook. On Zoom. Okay, I can hear myself. I have to click play. All right, muted Facebook. Okay. Okay. Well, hi. Welcome everyone to the Sunday sitting for August 28th. Sunday 7:30 sitting on Zoom. And tonight we are doing something a little different, streaming simultaneously, streaming to Facebook Live as well. So welcome Facebook. Hello. Hi everyone. Feel free to ask any questions you might have along the way. In fact, that's one of the reasons that we normally do this on Zoom, because Zoom is an easier format for asking questions. You know, on Facebook Live, you can feel free to type a question into the chat box, but I might not see it, or if I do see it, it might be several minutes after you posted it, and the conversation might have moved on since then. And then, you know, there's the inevitable delay. You know, you type a question, eventually I see it, I answer it verbally, and then you're typing in a follow-up or, you know, continuing the back and forth of the conversation, but it's delayed because of the time that it takes to type into the chat box on Facebook. Whereas on Zoom, we can have like a real conversation. I hear you, you hear me, and it's back and forth. And so that's good for when, that's good for, you know, when you have a specific question about some issue in your life. And then that's kind of like the point of all of this. the talking is really just to give the mind something to do while the transmission takes place. And when you ask a question, the answer for that particular person in that particular specific situation will come through. If there are no questions, then I'm just speaking in generalities and bringing through information that's going to be generally applicable to most of the people that are watching. And of course, the whole idea really is to go from the specific to the general. You know, so like you have some problem or issue in your life, something that you're not dealing with in a particularly skillful way, and you're not sure how to handle it or how to go about dealing with it. And you learn to you learn to resolve that particular and specific situation from the thought system of spirit, as opposed to the thought system of the ego, the conditioned mind, which it thinks in terms of conflict and separation. And so that particular situation, you see it from the thought system of spirit, and it's healed. And then another situation comes up and you deal with that the same way. And then another one comes up and you deal with that the same way. And so after you've dealt with enough specific situations, eventually you get to the point where you begin to see the big picture. You begin to see the general rule. So the specific begins to become general. So then when a specific situation comes up, you don't have to deal with it, or it's a lot easier to deal with it because you've seen like the general overall rule of things, right? You know, you deal with specific problems enough to where eventually you see what the general problem is. And then a specific problem comes up and you immediately go straight to the generality, the general understanding. So we kind of like sharpen our knives on the specific situations, and eventually we learn how to deal with things in a more general way, so that specific situations are not so challenging anymore. And, you know, when people ask questions and information is coming through specific to that particular person asking the question about the specific situation that they're asking about, other people, you know, watching the back and forth between us might be thinking, you know, that specific situation, I know I dealt with that back in 2004. I'm past that. But a lot of times what happens is, if you listen to the question and how it's answered, even though you might not any longer have a problem with that particular scenario, you'll get a hint, maybe even the whole thing delivered to you on a silver platter, of what the general rule is for that situation, and a general rule that up until now you had not really seen. So then you get the general rule and you get skyrocketed in your understanding. And then the next specific particular situation that comes up for you in your life is a lot easier to deal with, because you don't have to deal with it on the level of the specific. Now you can deal with it on the level of the general. And then the level of the general, of course, includes all these millions of specific instances. So it's always about moving from the specific to the general, at first, it seems like every person's problem is unique to them and within their own lives, totally unique. Yesterday, I had this problem. Today, I have this problem, and they're completely different. Often, that's not the case. Often, you repeat the same problem over and over and over again, year after year after year, because you haven't seen through to the underlying generality underneath that specific. So you've got a problem with the generality, and it's manifesting in your physical world as a specific situation or a particular scenario, that seems to vary every day. So it's good when people ask questions, because then specific information can come through and everybody benefits from it. Because if you're participating in this meeting, like nothing, we're all one, right? So if you're here and you have no questions, but someone else asks a question, the question and the answer are for you to hear. Even if the specific doesn't seem to be applicable to you, on some level, the question and the answer are for you to hear. So if anyone has a question, it's easier on Zoom. It's not impossible on Facebook. The thing is a lot of these people have people who do this kind of thing, teachers. They have like teams of technical assistants monitoring everything. I don't have that. It's just me. So I will do my best to answer any questions, however they come in. Chat on Facebook, chat on Zoom. That's an option. And but it's easier on Zoom. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the link for Zoom in Facebook. Well, I'm going to try. Bear with me. Been finding Facebook particularly glitchy lately. This is so strange. Let me see if I can do it from here. Okay. Okay, let's hit enter and see what happens. Okay. So I've pasted the, okay, and now on Zoom in the chat box, in case you guys want to go to Facebook instead, which after what I just said, you really shouldn't, but I want to be fair to everyone. Okay, so now everybody in Facebook and Zoom has all the links. So like I say, I'll do my best to monitor for any questions, but I don't have a team of technical people supporting me. All right, but questions are good. So Zoom is good because it's better for questions, and questions are good because then I can bring in information for you on your particular and specific situation and not just remain stuck with generalities, which ultimately is all you need. But if you're still at the level of specifics, the generalities aren't going to do much for you and be slightly helpful. Well, I guess they'll be very helpful, but it depends on where you are. If you've not a lot of experience in dealing with the specifics, then it's going to be really hard to translate a generality into something that's going to be helpful to you on a practical level. So as those of you who have been coming to these Sunday sittings and before that, the Friday night Zooms for a while know, I like to start every class off with a meditation. And I usually, I've been giving the basic instructions for a while now, and I would kind of like to get away from that. The people who have come, the old timers, they've heard these instructions a million times. And it also takes up some time. And so what I did was I recorded a YouTube video with the basic meditation instructions on them. And so the thing that I just posted with the link for the Zoom or the link for the Facebook, at the bottom, there's the link for where you can go to watch the basic meditation instruction, but not now. You don't need to go anywhere now. This is for next time. And if I begin to see the views on that video go up, and I know people are watching it, and I can get away from starting every class with the instructions. But tonight, since we're doing something new, streaming live over Facebook, my assumption is that there are people watching who have never received these instructions. So it would be good for them to get them. So some basic points. When you meditate, you want to be sitting in a chair that supports your back. You want to be sitting up straight. You want to have your feet flat on the floor. You want to be comfortable, but you don't want to be so comfortable that you fall asleep. You want to be comfortable in the sense that your body is not distracting you from your meditation. It isn't, you don't have to get into a full lotus posture in order to meditate. Most people find that very distracting, i.e., very uncomfortable. And some of the best meditators I've ever met slouched. The point is to be comfortable, but to be, all right, first of all, you want to be sitting up, not lying down, because if you're lying down, you're just going to fall asleep. And there's nothing wrong with falling asleep. Sleep is great. But it's not meditation. And so if you want to get the benefits of meditation, you need to meditate, not sleep. It's also good if you're sitting in like a chair or a couch, not like on a three-legged stool, because if you get drowsy, you could fall off and hurt yourself. And then also later tonight, and usually every Sunday night, when we do the breath work, people sometimes can get dizzy. And again, if you're on a unstable stool or some kind of, sitting on the edge of a cabinet or something, you could fall off and hurt yourself. So you want to be in like a chair with a back and arms to support your arms and to keep you seated, in case you doze off, fall asleep, get dizzy, whatever, you'll be safe. The chair's not going to let you fall down. So you want to make sure you're in a nice, safe, stable, secure chair. With a back to support your back so that you can keep your spine straight. You don't have to keep your spine painfully erect, painfully straight. And you don't, a lot of people think that once you start meditating, you're not allowed to move. You're not supposed to move. Again, and to paraphrase Jesus, meditation was made for man, not man for meditation. The purpose of the meditation is to serve you. If you can't meditate because your arm is bothering you and, doing this would make that stop being a bother, then you should do this. It's perfectly okay. You need to be comfortable so that you can meditate, and you do whatever it takes. So don't think that meditation means you have to be a statue. The flip side of that is that sometimes meditating through a painful feeling can liberate all kinds of subconscious material that you didn't even know was there. And the other flip side of it is you don't use fidgeting as a way of getting out of the meditation, right? If you have to do this once or twice to work out a kink so you can focus on your meditation, great. But if you're constantly moving, stretching, kicking, tapping your feet, now you've ventured into the territory of trying to get out of your meditation. You're not really meditating. And, nobody's watching you. Nobody knows what you're doing. So you have to be honest with yourself. Energetically, when you're meditating, it's best to have both feet flat on the floor. If you get like an overwhelming urge to cross your legs, that's an energy thing. And instead of crossing them at the knees, cross them at the ankles. Crossing at the knees is going to cut off the energy. Crossing them at the ankles allows the energy to flow. It just loops around. So sometimes people get like a really strong urge to cross their legs. And you want to not do that if you can. Keep your feet flat on the floor. But if you feel like you absolutely must cross your legs, it's better to cross them at the ankles as opposed to crossing them at the knees. So when we begin the meditation, I ring the gong 3 times. I have a gong here. This is my gonger. I think the technical term is mallet. That's the gong. Because I found out apparently you're not allowed to have a meditation unless you have a gong. So we start with the gong. So I ring the gong 3 times. That's the signal that we're going to start the meditation. And then at the end of the meditation, I ring the gong 3 more times so you know it's over. So you don't have to worry about the time. Or, you know, wonder if you missed something or fell asleep or whatever. I'll ring the gong 3 times, and that's your clue. That's your signal that the meditation is complete. After I want to begin the meditation, we begin the meditation with 3 deep cleansing breaths. By deep cleansing breaths, I mean sort of like a sigh of relief. And it's actually what it is. If you've ever experienced yourself a sigh of relief, and I think 99.9% of you probably have, you know how good it felt, how you were all tense, and then you had the sigh of relief and you were completely relaxed. Because whatever it was that you were tensed from, that is now making you, that you're now relieved about, causing you to breathe a sigh of relief, has passed. It's no longer a problem. And so now you can be relaxed. So you were like tensed up against something, getting ready for something bad, in preparation for something. And then it turned out to be nothing. And you breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe you saw a rope on the road and you thought it was a boa constrictor. Then you realized it was just a rope, and you breathe that sigh of relief. And that might be the first moment where you realize how on guard and tense and scared you were. You know, you just go right into this reactive mode of self-defense when you think it's a boa constrictor coming at you. And then you realize it's not, and you breathe a sigh of relief, and you get completely calm and relaxed, and it just feels really good, and it gets you centered. So it turns out you don't have to wait for a boa constrictor to breathe a sigh of relief. You can, the sigh of relief comes about naturally in response to the circumstances, but you can also imitate a sigh of relief and bring about in yourself that same feeling of relaxation and centeredness and peace and calmness. And so a sigh of relief is like really high up in the chest, nice and deep. And then on the exhale, you just let everything go. And you might even want to vocalize a little bit on the exhale. So it would look something like this, to do 3 of them in a row. You know, move your arms if you want, you know, just really get into it. Just like a complete letting go, right? And so after the 3 gongs, we do 3 sighs of relief as a complete letting go. So what are we letting go of? Really what we're letting go of is everything that has happened to you the past week since the last Zoom meeting. Or if you had a particularly eventful, stressful day today, we're letting go of all of that, everything that happened to you today. We're letting all of the past stuff go. You don't bring that with you into meditation. You don't use meditation to try to figure out the solution to some problem that you're dealing with right now. You leave the problem behind. During your meditation, like if you try to figure out, if you use the meditation to try to figure out with your conceptual mind the solution to your problem, you're not going to figure it out, and you're not going to have a very good meditation. So you're just defeating the whole purpose. If you can just leave the problem behind and give all of your, just give yourself to the meditation, you may very well find that after the meditation or during the meditation, the solution just comes to you. Or you may find that the problem goes away. So this is, if you've ever been to formal meditation, like at a formal meditation hall, they usually ask you to remove your shoes before you come in. So you go in, you take your shoes off outside the door, and they usually have these like shoe racks where you put your shoes up. And oftentimes they'll tell you, leave your problems behind with your shoes. You can always pick them up again an hour from now when you go to get your shoes. They'll still be there. So you leave. So this is the equivalent. The three gongs and the three sighs of relief. That gives you three gongs, three gongs, and then three sighs of relief. Gives you all that time to separate yourself from your problems, to leave your problems behind, to leave your problems outside the door of the meditation hall with your shoes, to make a sacred boundary between your everyday mundane life full of problems and your meditation life, where you are giving the time to meditation. And I like to say that the universe is not going to miss you for 1 hour. When you meditate, wanting to hold on to your problems is wanting to remain in control of the universe. Well, okay, newsflash, you don't control anything, and you're not in control of the universe. And the universe will get along just fine without you controlling things for a little bit of time. So after we do the three gongs and the three cleansing sighs of relief, then we're going to do 15 or 20 minutes of meditation. And if you have a meditation that you already know and you like to use, feel free. If you don't, an easy meditation that most people can benefit from is just to count your breaths, count your inhales. So you simply, traditionally you close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes. Either way is fine. If you can close your eyes, that's best, because then you're blocking out all the distractions in your environment. Speaking of distractions, cliche thing, be sure you turn your phone off so the ringer doesn't bother you while you're meditating. Again, the universe can get along without you for a little bit of time. So anyway, where was I? So eyes closed, and you breathe in and out through the nose. Just breathe normally, and all you're going to do is count your inhales. When you breathe in, that's 1. Then you breathe out. Breathe in again, that's 2. Then you breathe out. Breathe in again, that's 3. When you get to 10, you start over again at 1. So you're just counting your all you're doing is breathing and counting your inhales. And you count off 10, and then when 10 are done, you start over again at 1. So as you go along with this, what you'll often find is you suddenly realize you stopped counting, or you suddenly realize you're on 48 when you shouldn't be any higher than 10. So don't beat yourself up. So what happened is you got distracted, a thought arose, and you followed the thought instead of keeping your awareness on your breathing. This is all about learning to center your awareness in your breathing and not allowing thoughts that are arising to distract you. So if a thought distracts you, that's how you wind up losing your place, forgetting to count, going past 10. And what will happen is eventually you'll notice that you did that. You won't spend you're not going to finish the meditation on 1,000 because you never caught yourself going past 10. You'll catch yourself. That's the whole point of the counting. It's perfectly fine if you don't do it perfectly. You don't beat so you don't beat yourself up, because if you beat yourself up, no, I'll never be able to do this. I went past 10. I lost count. That's the third time tonight. Those are just more thoughts. And your ego would love you to follow those thoughts and get lost, get distracted from your meditation. So, because what got you distracted in the first place was a thought. You followed a thought. So then you realize that you have lost the count, and all you do is don't beat yourself up. Just gently bring yourself back to the count. Start over again at 1. Go to your next inhale, count it as 1, and just keep going. And this is a skill. Eventually, you'll be doing it perfectly. And as you do this more and more skillfully, the monkey mind gets quiet, and you will begin to feel your true nature, the essence behind all of the thoughts becoming more noticeable for you. And so it is a very peaceful and restful place to be, which is why I started doing these. I was, for those of you that know, I started this because after the pandemic, we were all on lockdown. I began to, I mainly started this for people on St. Croix, because after Maria, we were still recovering from that, and then we had the pandemic and the lockdown, and people were really stressing out, and they were on overwhelm, and there was a lot of bad behavior. The way people were driving, the way they were treating each other in the stores, in the lines, checkout lines at the post office. People were they really needed something to help them. And so I started this really just as a way to teach some basic meditation techniques and some basic breathwork techniques that are good for dealing with stress and anxiety and overwhelm. And then we began to take questions and give talks and kind of get into more advanced spiritual topics. But you can take from this whatever you want, whatever you need. Because, ultimately, the most simple count your breath meditation can become the most profound and advanced spiritual technique depending on the attitude that you bring to it. If you make contact with your true nature, simply by virtue of doing a basic counting meditation, which is definitely very possible, very doable. That puts that you may not realize this, but that puts you at a farther along the spiritual path than many human beings for thousands of years ever managed to get to. So it's a great opportunity. So let's see if there's any questions on Facebook. I don't even have a scroll. I don't even have a scroll button. All right. Well, it seems to be working. So we'll begin the meditation now. 3 gongs, 3 deep cleansing sighs of relief. Leave all of your thinking, all of your problems behind. Begin to count your breath. We'll do that for 10 minutes, and then I'll ring the gong 3 more times. Three deep cleansing breaths. And whatever meditation you like, you can use the counting your inhales if you like. And we'll begin. Oh, I lost my video. Oh. Okay. Thanks for joining. Um, since you were not at the beginning, I was just saying that Zoom is good because you can ask questions, and it's good to ask questions because then I can bring through information for a particular person having a particular scenario or situation. So if there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Let me go to Facebook. Am I live now? Okay. With such a big delay, it's hard to tell where we're at. And so, yeah, when I began this with the meditation and the breath work, it's kind of new. Not many people would come. And but the ones who did come would tell me how great they felt afterwards and how it was really helping them to deal with all of the stress. And there's kind of a thing going around now people think everything's wonderful now, there's no more stress, everything's back to normal. Okay, well, first of all, normal was not all that great. And second of all, if you're paying attention, you know that things are getting worse. So I'm going to continue to offer these because I know that eventually people are going to need them. And as more and more people need them, I'll be here. I may change the time though, because during while we were doing this, a friend of mine's Sunday night satsang came up, and I scheduled around him because I don't want people to have to choose. We used to not be at the same time, and so I wondered what was going on, and now I figured it out. He had to move. And again, this is part of things are not getting back to normal. He had to move because basically his state caught fire. So he ran away, he had to move away, flee the fire. So now he's in a different time zone. And so it looks like now we might be doing our thing on Zoom at the same time. So I have been wanting to change my time for a while now because I kind of want to get outside and get into the sunlight and have some tropical scenery behind me. I mean, my wife makes this wall as interesting as she can, and you can see she does a beautiful job. But how long has it been? Like 3 years you guys have been looking at this wall. Maybe you want to see something different. So I've been, toying with that idea, and now it looks like with my friend having to move and going into a different time zone, maybe then now's the time. So in terms, yeah, in terms of things not getting back to normal and people still needing ways of dealing with what's coming up. You know, I was watching a video. I was watching a video on YouTube, and there was a spiritual teacher who was saying that she doesn't like to talk about or deal with or think about things like cancer or climate change, global warming, or COVID, that she prefers to remain positive. That the best way that you can help the world is by pursuing your own enlightenment and realizing that none of these things are real. She says, the world isn't real. Your disease, your cancer isn't real. Your systemic oppression is not real. And so she doesn't talk about those things or think about those things. She focuses on her own awakening and deepening her own awakening. And I was noticing that here was a white woman, fairly attractive, pretty face. She was doing the video from her home, and from the background, upper middle class, I would say, well-to-do, not financially challenged, we could say. And she was doing the whole standard toxic positivity thing. Like, if you come to me for help because you have cancer, the best way I can help you is to ask you to think about, why did you create cancer in your life? And if you come to me for help because you want me to be some kind of climate activist and protest global warming, why did you create global warming in your life? And if you think you're being oppressed, why did you create systemic oppression in your life? To paraphrase her. And as I was looking at her, I was thinking, you know, when she has to wear a mask again, only this time from the top of her forehead to the bottom of her neck, because she wants to cover up the horrifyingly disfiguring and permanent lesions on her face from monkeypox, while standing in a line for 6 hours to get her daily ration of 1 liter of water. She's going to be singing a completely different tune, I would imagine. She'll be talking then about how we're all in this together and we have to look out for one another and help one another and do what we can to help to alleviate other people's suffering. Because, you know, of course, right now, she's just kind of Karen, another Karen, indulging in white privilege, only now it's rebranded. Now it's being spiritual or being positive. But it still results in a kind of indifference to the suffering of others. And it's probably the case that she has suffered in her own life by virtue of the fact of being a woman, by virtue of the fact of being attractive, which has, you know, people don't realize it, but a lot of times being an attractive woman can be a problem. And it always amazes me how people who suffer under one aspect or because of one aspect or because of one scenario never think to apply that to other people suffering under other aspects, under other scenarios. I've suffered as a woman because I'm a woman. I've suffered, and therefore I didn't like it. It wasn't very nice, and I would like it if nobody else had to suffer. And so then if you're suffering from cancer or you're suffering from systemic oppression or whatever the other person is suffering from, you would think there would be a compassionate sympathy towards that other person and their suffering. But it doesn't, it's mystifying to me that rarely happens. But of course, that's the ego. The ego wants to defend you. And so your suffering is always the only one that matters. And, you know, a lot of activists don't want to have anything to do with spirituality, and that doesn't work. Because if you get into activism from the standpoint of the ego, then you're always in conflict and confrontation. And that is what has caused all the problems that we are having right now in the first place. So you're not going to solve those problems by continuing to do what you've always done, since what you've always done is what caused and created those problems in the first place. And then a lot of spiritual people don't want to get into activism. And that doesn't work either. We have to bring our spiritual understanding back down into the world of form. As Jesus said, to be in the world, but not of it. And you know, I call this embodied enlightenment, to bring the spiritual understanding from the heavens back down into the body, into your body in the world of form. As long as you have a body in the world of form, then you have a responsibility to that world. And of course, when spirit begins to bring something through, if it's important, it's not going to just bring it to one guy. And what I've been noticing lately is it seems to be in the zeitgeist now. I'm beginning to see it everywhere. I am beginning to see all kinds of spiritual teachers talking about this. They don't call it embodied enlightenment. Some have close to that. Doing the breath work, one advantage that I have because I specialize in breath work it's a very body-oriented approach. We always are talking about getting out of your head and into your heart, getting back into your body. Most people live in their heads. And awakening can't get stuck in the head. It has to come down into the whole body. So I'm very body-oriented. And as I began to look at it is true. Your cancer does not exist. Your systemic oppression isn't real. How can it be real? You're not real. The world's not real. That's on one level, the absolute level. As the Tibetan Buddhists would put it, on the absolute level, nirvana and samsara are the same. Nirvana is like the bliss level region. Samsara is the world of suffering. And so on the absolute level, samsara is the same as nirvana. Nirvana is the same as samsara. They're the same on the absolute level. But on the relative level, well, to paraphrase Adyashanti, who I think actually, come to think of it, was paraphrasing someone else. Yes, on the absolute level, nirvana and samsara are the same, and everyone is already enlightened. But a fat lot of good that does you if you don't know it. In other words, if it's just words, it does you no good. And so on the form level, the cancer may not be real, but the suffering is. The suffering is very real. And part of non-dual realization is that you are one with all people. So their suffering is my suffering. Their joys and happiness are my joys and happiness, which brings about an automatic compassionate response to try to do what you can to help with suffering. I think Jesus, he healed people. He didn't just say to them, your illness is not real, or why did you give that illness to yourself? He knew that the world wasn't real, that the illness was not real, that the person who thought they were in pain was not real, but that person on the form level is suffering, and you have to meet that suffering. You have a responsibility to meet that suffering. Because there's a reason why the world is not going back to normal and why things are getting worse instead of getting better. There are universal laws, and well, I often talk about how the universe will send you signs. At first, it might be like a tap on the shoulder. And if you ignore that, then there'll be a stronger sign. If you ignore that, there'll be a stronger sign, until eventually the universe is going to whop you upside the head with a 2x4, right? So, it's like if you are working at the wrong job, you might get like a feeling like you should go someplace else. If you ignore that, you might start all of a sudden start getting job offers from places where you would be happier. And all of these are signs from the universe trying to prod you. And it's really because you're not doing what you know you should be doing. If you're honest with yourself, you wouldn't be staying at a job you hate. is making you miserable, and you're making everyone around you miserable. But people get, they're afraid. They're afraid to make a change. So the universe will send you signs, and if you just keep ignoring them, eventually you get a really obvious sign, like you get fired. Same thing with physical diseases. You'll have a slight you have a feeling like you should be doing something different than what you're doing. And if you keep ignoring it long enough, eventually you come home from the doctor with a life-threatening diagnosis. But you don't go straight to that. You don't go straight to getting fired. The universe gives you plenty of warnings. It starts out with little light feather touches on, and takes a feather and taps you on the shoulder, trying to get your attention. And this is all what you want. You are not doing what you know you should be doing, what you know you need to be doing. And you've told the universe to help you with this. And so you get little signs. They start out small. They get stronger and stronger and stronger if you just keep ignoring them. I mean, if you listen the first time, then you save yourself a lot of grief. But if you refuse to listen, if you're stubborn and you don't pay attention, eventually you get, the universe comes and, hits you on the head with a 2x4. And that's where we're at right now in terms of the global situation, the national situation. We have been creating an increasingly dysfunctional civilization, an increasingly dysfunctional society, an increasingly dysfunctional world, because we've been listening to the ego, the thought system of separation, conflict, confrontation, competition, fear, lack. What are you competing for unless you think there's a lack of abundant resources? And that way of looking at things can only result in either the end result always had to be devastation and destruction. And we've been ignoring all the little feathers, and we were ignoring the strong claps on the shoulder. We've been ignoring the signals from the universe. And now we're approaching whomp on the head with a 2x4 time for the entire world, for the entire human race. And it does not have to end badly. The point of it is to get us to come together. What often happens when people are stressed by challenging situations in the global environment is they become even more separative. They break up into tribes, and it's, my tribe against your tribe, my family against your family. A fight for survival of the fittest. That's not going to work. That's what got us here in the first place. We are being led to a place where only cooperate. You either cooperate or you die. Only cooperation is going to work. Only seeing the oneness of all people is going to work on a practical level. I mean, actually, the universe is sending us a strong signal because it wants us to see that we have to give up the old ways and adopt new ways of peaceful cooperation and love for one another. I mean, if I'm not perfect. I feel like I know everything. What brought me to this whole idea of embodied enlightenment, which, like I say, it's in the zeitgeist now. You see people talking about bringing non-dual understanding into everyday life. Integrated enlightenment. It's really, a lot of people are talking about it now. It's really beginning to get out there. This whole idea of you can't let spirituality be an excuse for not getting your hands dirty. Because you really have to look at that. Are you really so spiritual that you don't want to have anything to do with the real world? Or are you using your spirituality as an excuse to avoid the real world? If you're telling people that the best help I can give you for having cancer is to get you to think about why did you create that for yourself? Well, then that begs the obvious question, why did you create for yourself someone in your perception who has cancer? Why did you project into your field of awareness, if it's all just illusion and your projection, why did you project into your field of awareness, into your perception, someone who's being systematically oppressed? Maybe you should look at that. What's right? Because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If that's what you're telling other people, your cancer isn't real, your oppression isn't real, the struggles of marginal communities are not real, you're just projecting that into your perception. Well, then why are you projecting them, that suffering, those suffering people and groups, into your perception? By saying what you're saying to those people, you're basically, what you're doing is you're refusing to look at your own projections. And so in either case, the thing to do, the way that you look at your own projections, is by going into your body and feeling the energetic response that arises in reaction to those projections. You have something arising in your field of perception, which you put there, your mind, the mind, put that there for you to see. And now you see, all the senses. You might only read about it or hear about it. But what you see is like the general stand-in. So if something arises in your world, what energy within your body is arising? That's how you deal with this stuff. That's how you begin to make progress. That's working with the specific to get to the general. I mean, this idea that spirituality should remain above it all and not get its hands dirty. That maybe, you never want to make like a blanket statement, and that might be true for a few people who are holding a particularly high frequency. And like their contribution is they are holding such a high frequency that it makes it possible for others to get there, and it kind of like it raises the bar for the entire planet and kind of elevates things for all of us. But those are a few people. That's a rare exception here or there. In talking about how this how toxic positivity is a very egoic separating thing. It's like a judgmental thing. It's like, it sounds like I'm being judgmental towards the people who are doing it. When I talked about a Karen practicing white privilege rebranded as spirituality, that sounds very judgmental, like I'm seeing her as different from me. And nothing could be further from the case. We're all one. It's really, I've wrestled, like I said, I'm not perfect. And I've wrestled with this. On the one hand, I don't want to give energy to negative things. I do think the best thing you can do for the world is to pursue your own enlightenment, because then that raises, every person that becomes enlightened makes it easier for the next person. And eventually, when we are all enlightened, we'll see through the illusion and none of this will matter anymore. But in the meantime, until that happens, the suffering is real. And so for me, the question becomes, is my spirituality a reason not to engage with that suffering? Or is it not, in fact, all the more reason why I should engage with that suffering and out of compassion, try to alleviate it? And it does seem as though people who sometimes speak a kind of spiritual indifference to the suffering of others as the responsibility of the suffering person because they created it, are not looking at what they are creating in their own reality. They're not doing the spiritual work. If you have arising in your perception your own projection of someone suffering from cancer, let's say, You put that there, your mind put that there for a reason. And the reason is clearly not so that you could just ignore it. Your response has to be more genuine than that, more authentic than that, right? So like I say, I'm not perfect and I'm grappling with these issues as well. But I definitely come down on the side of you have to get your hands dirty and using the idea of being too spiritual or too positive to want to get your hands dirty is, I deeply suspect, some kind of spiritual bypassing. There is some deep and profound work on some level that you are running away from. So let's move from cancer to like a global thing. Let's talk about global warming, climate change, the record weather events that we're having daily now. A typical response of the ego is to just want to ignore that, to pretend like it's not happening until your face is covered with lesions and you're standing in line for 6 hours to get a liter of water, right? Until it impacts you personally. And then unfortunate response of a lot of spiritual people is to ignore it because it's negative and you don't want to bring your vibe down and you don't want to give energy to negative thinking. But can you see how both of those are egoic in nature because they are breeding separation? You are separate from and better than the other. You ignore it, you're white, you're financially well off, that gives you a little bit of insularity. The suffering doesn't hit you first. Other people in faraway places, not in your tribe, your clan, your group, they're the ones that suffer. The suffering doesn't come to you. Your position as a white person in America, as someone who's financially well off, insulates you, protects you. And so it's easy to be unconcerned about the suffering of others. But what we're seeing, the universe is going to hit us upside the head with a 2x4. The suffering is coming to your front door. No one is going to be insulated from this. But you feel insulated. So you are separate from the people who are not insulated. That's the egoic reaction. That's the mindset that got us here in the first place. You don't have to care unless it affects you personally. That's what the ego does. I mean, one of the reasons that COVID got out of control is because the healthcare system in the hinterlands of China isn't all that great. And the healthcare system in the hinterlands of other countries isn't all that great. Well, so let me just make a long story short. It doesn't matter how good your healthcare is when you're dealing with a pandemic, if the healthcare system in some country on the other side of the world is awful, because they'll get it and eventually you'll get it because it's contagious. In other words, because we think of ourselves as separate instead of thinking of ourselves as one, we never thought that about making the healthcare. If you make the healthcare system for the entire planet top notch and first rate, it greatly increases the odds that you're not going to have a pandemic. You can't, you cannot protect only the United States from a pandemic. You cannot protect only the United States from famine. You cannot protect only the United States from skyrocketing global temperatures. Because the United States is on planet Earth. So anything that takes place on the planet or that affects the planet is eventually going to come to the United States. So that's the difference between looking at it from the standpoint of the thought system of spirit and seeing how we're all one, and the thought system of the ego and thinking that you're separate from everyone, separate from and better than. And so on the flip side, if the spiritual person who is saying, doesn't want to get their hands dirty because you created the cancer for yourself, you created the systemic oppression for yourself. Again, that's not seeing the other as one with you and you as one with the other and having some kind of compassion for their suffering. That is seeing them as having a flaw and failed on some fundamental level, whereas you haven't. But again, there but for the grace of God, go I. Your time will come. The person that you said to them, why did you create cancer in your life, might be at your front door 3 or 4 years from now, asking you, why did you create leukemia in your life? Or why did you create famine in your life? It's not an individual responsibility. You're not creating these things in your life. This is life happening, moving us away from separation consciousness, egoic consciousness, and towards unity consciousness, source consciousness, thinking with the thought system of spirit. I mean, to me, it's plain as day. But there's I was talking, there's a certain kind of doubling down thing that people do, which again mystifies me, like what I was saying before about people who suffer, they suffer because of this or that, and yet somehow they're not able to see the suffering of others or to have compassion for the suffering of others, to like their suffering, the way that they suffer because they're this or that is very real to them. And yet at the same time, they have zero empathy, sympathy, and compassion for someone else who's suffering in a different way. But suffering is suffering. And so sometimes when the universe taps you gently with a feather, some people get it right away and they change their behavior. Some people get it when the tap with the feather becomes a strong slap on the shoulder. Usually by the time you get to being the stage of being whomped on the head with a 2x4, by that time, almost everyone has gotten it. But there are people who will double down at that time. Being whomped on the head with the 2x4 makes them so angry and upset that it's almost as if they say, I'll be damned if I'm going to change now. I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, and I'm going to do it twice as much. We are being hit upside the head with a 2x4. We either abandon the egoic way of thinking and embrace the thought system of spirit, or we will perish. The universe has basically maneuvered us into a corner. But like I said, it does not have to end badly. If enough people embrace this energetic, enlightened embodiment, integrated ascension, integrated integrating non-dual understanding into practical life. I mean, it's out there in the zeitgeist because lots of people are getting this. So it must be an important message that Spirit wants us to get. Spirit wants everyone to understand the situation that we're in, and that if we respond with the thought system of Spirit, all of this can change in an instant. You'll suddenly see, if enough people do this, you'll suddenly see miraculous improvements overnight in the world situation. Ukraine and Russia does not have to lead to nuclear war in Europe. Climate change does not have to lead to famine and water shortages everywhere. Both of those are the path that our ego mind currently has us on. But Spirit would have us change paths. And that could be so quick, so fast. We could be on a completely different path, going to a completely different reality. But we aren't going to make that change. That's a spiritual maneuver. It's like a spiritual quantum jump. And egoic minds are not going to be able to do that without spiritual leadership. So the last thing the world needs right now is for spiritual people to be abdicating their responsibility and just saying, well, it's just what they're creating and it's not real, and I'm going to just focus on my navel. And I have to say, honestly, it really feels, like I say, I am struggling with this, or trying to come to terms with my own understanding of this and put it into words. I feel it on an energetic level, and it really feels like this abdication of spiritual responsibility is a kind of spiritual bypassing of something that's people don't, there's work that you're avoiding, there's work that you don't want to do. Hmm. Okay, I guess. And, you know, that all sounds political, but I really don't even care about politics. And honestly, on another level, I'm completely indifferent to how this goes. I mean, a fat lot of good. Yes, the nirvana and samsara are the same. A fat lot of good that does, and everyone's already enlightened, and a fat lot of good that does you if you don't know it. But if you do know it, then how it eventually all ultimately plays out is not going to cause you to suffer. I mean, that's the whole point of pursuing this understanding in the first place. So that you realize that no matter what, you are perfectly invulnerable, perfectly safe, unconditionally loved. And it gives you a stance where you can rest, from which you don't feel threatened all the time, so that you can participate in the world in a helpful way. You have more to contribute, but you do have to contribute. Be in the world, but not of it. If you are in the world and of it, you're just making all the problems worse. You're just like everybody else. You're not improving anything. Even when you think you're improving, even when you think you're making, even when you think you're, no, the activist of the year, award-winning person who's gonna like out debate all those wrong people. You're just making it worse, because it's the same egoic mentality. So you're in the world and of the world. That doesn't make anything better. To be not of the world, in other words, you're coming from the thought system of spirit with love, unconditional love, and knowing that everyone is already enlightened, knowing that nirvana and samsara are the same, knowing that none of this is real, So you're not of the world. But if you don't get your hands dirty, you're not in the world either. So you're not helping either. And Jesus's advice, and I don't want people to think that I'm like, my first mystical experiences were with Jesus. I kind of come from an esoteric, mystical Christian orientation, but I like to think a lot past that. It's just tonight, these particular examples are coming to mind. So Jesus said to be in the world, but not of it. And so if you are awake within the dream, when you know that nirvana and samsara are the same, when you know that everyone is already enlightened, when you know that we are all one, you are awake inside the dream. But you're not awake from the dream. You haven't woken up yet from the dream. If you are here in a body and you breathe, walk, talk, use the bathroom, eat and drink, you're here in a body. And so participation in the world, even though you're not of it because you know it's all a dream, participation in the world is your opportunity to wake up from the dream. That's how you wake up from the dream, by feeling those energetic movements in your body that come about as a result of you dealing with the dream. The Tibetan Buddhists talk about how other people are the polishing stones, how the jewelers will take a rough diamond or jewel or whatever. I don't know, exactly how this goes, but so they have a bag. They have a bag, and inside the bag will be like a diamond or a jade or whatever that needs to be polished. And they'll fill the bag with a bunch of rocks, and they shake the bag up, and eventually the rocks smooth off, clean off, get the dirt off, the diamond, the jade, make it look better, polish it up. They make it look prettier, they polish it up. And so other people are our polishing stones. Your interactions with others is your opportunity for polishing yourself. And so ignoring an opportunity to interact with others by wanting to be not of the world, but also not in it, not participating. It's like to me, energetically, on some level, it feels like work that needs to get done as being avoided. Spiritual work that needs to be done as being avoided. All right, so let's end with 20 connected breaths. And keep an eye out. I might be changing the meeting time. And I'm also going to try to not go over the basic meditation instructions again. Do some more. We're going to move more into some advanced breath work. And we'll see how that goes. All right, so 20 connected breaths, for those of you who don't know, is really it's 5 breaths and you repeat it 4 times for a total of 20. You breathe in and out. Now for this, you definitely need to be sitting down in a nice sturdy chair. You breathe in and out through your nose. It's a set of 5 repeated 4 times. So the set of 5, what is that? It's the first 4 breaths are as fast as you can, or as fast as you comfortably can. I used to say as fast and as deep. And then I began to get all these extreme sports people who try to kill themselves. So like faster than you would normally breathe sitting in a chair, with some vigor, with some alacrity, but don't try to like breathe as fast as humanly possible, like you're trying to blow your head off or something, right? Forget the extreme sports stuff. So 4 fast breaths, and then the 5th one is as deep as you can. So it's 4 fast ones, 1 deep one. In and out through the nose, connected. There's no pause between the inhale or the exhale. The inhale goes in. As soon as the inhale is complete, relax completely. Just let the exhale fall out. You don't push the exhale. You don't blow the exhale. This is very inhale oriented. You're focusing mainly on the inhale. You're pulling the inhale in up to the top of your chest as deeply as you can. The first 4 breaths are as fast as you can. You focus on the speed, right? The 5th breath, you focus on making it deep. All 5 breaths, your focus is on the inhale, either fast or deep. The exhale is almost like an afterthought. You just relax and let the breath fall out. When the exhale is complete, you immediately take the next inhale. There's no pause. You don't wait to breathe in. You don't wait to breathe out. So think of it as like you're breathing in a circle. You're going around a circle. It's just 1 breath. It's not 20 breaths. It's not 5 breaths. It's 1 breath that just continuously is going in, out, right? If you stick a finger out every 5th breath, 5, 10, 15, 20, remember, the 5th breath is the deep one. So if you lose track, you're not sure where you are, all you have to remember is multiples of 5, 5, 10, 15, 20. Those are the deep ones. The 5th breath is deep. The 10th breath is deep. The 15th one is deep. The 20th breath is deep. The others are all the fast ones. And there's a warming up effect. Your 20th breath is going to be deeper than your 5th breath was. And your 19th breath is going to be faster, probably, than your 4th breath was. So you get faster and deeper as you go along. Another common thing that people do is to pause between sets. Like you do this first set of 5 and you feel complete. So you kind of like pause before you start the next set of 5. No. Breathe from 1 to 20 without a pause. There's no breaks between sets. I just break it up into sets of 5 because that makes it easier to keep track of. So it looks like this. Oh, very important. In and out is one. In and out is one breath. And then in and out is two. In and out is three. But don't think of it as in and out or inhale, exhale, because that has a tendency to make you pause between breaths. And we don't want you to pause between breaths. We want you to breathe continuously without a pause. But sometimes people will breathe in and count that as one, then they breathe out and count that as two, then they breathe in and count that as three, and then out is four, and then in is five. And they think they've just done a complete set of five, and they've only done half of a set. So a complete inhale and exhale is one, all right? So okay, so notice how every fifth breath I stuck out a finger, 5, 10, 15, 20. And when I finished the 20th breath, I didn't just like open my eyes and start doing stuff. I rested in that state for a few minutes. And if you're at home and not worried about signing off the computer, then you can rest in that state for as long as you want. And I would recommend that you do so. So we'll do it together, and you can just, and you don't like, everybody's breathing is different. Don't try to copy me. What's fast for me might be slow for you. What's deep for me might be shallow for you. Your pace, your breathing mechanism. Let your breath teach you how to breathe. So you breathe 4 fast, connected, inhale, merging into the exhale merging into the next inhale, so that it's just one continuous breath. And the 5th breath is the deep one. We do that. It's a set of 5. We repeat it 4 times for a total of 20. And so I'll begin, but like I say, don't worry about copying me. Breathe your speed, breathe fast for you and breathe deep for you. And take your time, come back to your body, rest here for as long as you like. Thank you everyone for coming. See you next week. Probably going to be 7:30 next Friday, but I am looking at time change. I mean, 7:30 next Sunday. I'll keep you posted. Thank you. Love you all. Have a great week.